Good morning, and you're very welcome to this morning's Signpost webinar. My name is Pat Murphy, Head of Environment Knowledge Transfer, and this morning's webinar is brought to you in conjunction with Dairy Sustainability Ireland, Food Drink Ireland Skillnet, and NRN. This morning, I'm delighted to be joined by Martin Bourke. Martin is an organic tillage specialist with Teagasc, and he's talking to us this morning, or addressing the question, is organics a viable option for Irish tillage farmers? Martin, you're very welcome.
Morning, Pat. Thank you for having me. Yeah.
And you're not going to take offense at being called an organic tillage specialist, no?
No, I'm very proud to be an organic tillage specialist. Yeah. So.
Very good. We're also joined by Fintan Phelan. Fintan is head of farm management and rural development section, or knowledge transfer section within Teagasc. Fintan, you're very welcome.
Morning, Pat.
Fintan,
morning, everybody.
The unit you manage dealing with organics has grown, I think, fairly rapidly in the last months and year to the demand that's out there, I think.
There's been a big increase. I suppose there's been a doubling of the number of organic farmers, and it's seen to grow further as well in the future. And hopefully people will get information today that'll help them in that challenge and addressing maybe the opportunity that is coming with organics. We've had the appointment of 6 new organic dedicated advisors throughout the country. So they're covering a geographical spread across the country. And we have 3 organic specialists now, of which Martin is one. And the first time we've had a specific lead on tillage, which is, I suppose it's one of the weaker points in terms of the organics, and our grassland system supports the livestock enterprises very well in the summer months. But the winter costs are really what are challenging for organic farmers, and the costs of those inputs in the winter. So there's good money in organics in the tillage side, and we're trying to encourage more people to take up that opportunity. And part of that is we have a monitor farm program running for the next 5 years that's being launched today. It's called Growing Organics. It's been launched on the farm of Jason Stanley in Earl here in County Laois. And if anybody wants to go to that, we'll be encouraging them to go to that, but also we'll have a series of walks over the next number of years.
Okay, so significant resources going into the area. Martin, if you're happy to begin your presentation.
Yeah, I'll work away here now. I'll just share my screen. Second now. And
just remind people that if you have questions for Martin while he's giving his presentation, use the Q&A. And to remember that I suppose we'll be putting up the presentation and the video within the next week on the Teagasc website as well.
So now, can you see that okay, Pat?
Perfect.
Yeah? Lovely. Okay, I suppose before I start, just a little bit about myself for those of you that don't know me. I've only just started in this job in the last 8 or 9 months. And before this, I suppose I was born and bred on a tillage farm in Wicklow. And I was a teacher of tillage in Kildalton College for 7 years. And then I moved up back home to Wicklow, and I was a crops advisor there for the last 21 years. So I suppose it's all I've known is tillage farming. And I suppose I have a great passion for tillage farming. And about a year ago, I saw this job opportunity come up, and I decided to do a little bit of research into it. And the more I researched it, the more I realized I didn't know a whole lot about organic tillage farming and the opportunities it has, So without further ado, I'll try and share with you some of the options, some of the opportunities as I see it, and I'll address this question. So is organics a viable option for Irish tillage farmers? So to begin with, as Fintan says, look, there was a doubling of organic farming numbers. The number of farmers went from 2,000 to 4,000 overnight before Christmas, when the scheme closed on the 9th of December. And, we have a target of getting now to 10%. The Ireland's Climate Action Plan target is now to have 10% of the utilisable land area in organic by 2030. Okay, that target was 7.5% by 2027. At the moment, we're looking at, there's about 190,000 hectares, closer actually to 4.5% of land area. The average farm size there is 47 hectares. So But if we get to, you know, this 10% figure, we would be looking at about 10,000 farmers nationally farming organically by the year 2030. And I suppose just to say, you know, many of these farmers are beef and sheep farmers. We're looking at around 85 to 90% of them beef and sheep farms. Okay.
Martin, is there a tag on your screen that you can just
Oh,
click
yes,
on?
get rid of that there. Yeah, okay. Now, that gone?
Yes, perfect. Thanks.
Right. Yeah, the other one then should disappear. Yeah, okay. So why, I suppose, was there such an increase in organic farming there? How did the numbers double? And I suppose one of the key things, obviously, is we make no secret of it. It was the attractive payment rates that were announced last autumn. And you can see there across all the different enterprises there, the different payment rates. And if I just highlight here, first of all, the tillage one is what we want to concentrate on today. So you can get anywhere up to 70 hectares of tillage land. You can get a conversion payment of €320 a hectare to bring your land into organic. And you'll get that, it takes 2 years to convert your land to organic. So the first 2 years, the land is called in conversion. And then in the third year, after your 2 years is up, your land is now fully organic. You're fully certified organic. So naturally, the payment rate comes back then a little bit to 270 because it's envisaged you're getting a premium price at that stage. You're getting full organic price for your produce. Okay, so. And then the other thing there, actually at the bottom of the screen there, you can see the participation payment. This is a new thing they introduced as well. The department brought in a payment of €2,000 in the first year and €1,400 each year after. That's to cover things like, you know, the organic license, your conversion plan at the start. There's a lot of bits and pieces that, you know, do incur a cost. So that was and it, you know, it definitely covers that very generously. So what does it mean to a tillage farmer? So he or she, if they were farming, say, if they just had 10 hectares in the scheme, they would get €320 a hectare on the 10 hectares plus the €2,000 participation payment. So you'd be looking there at the first one there, the first payment of 5,200, you can see. So, you know, that's in year one. And then across over the 5 years, you'd see 22,100, and that's just on 10 hectares. So it's very, very attractive payment rates. If you did have the 70 hectares in there, you could see 109,000. If you had 70 hectares in the scheme, that's what you'd get in payments over the 5 years. So it's a lot of money. And one of the things, I suppose, in terms of the opportunities for tillage farmers, I would see this as a huge one, that you don't have to convert all your farm. You can do a partial conversion if you're in tillage. So because it is a big ask, there is in the mindset a fear of failure. How could I possibly do it? You know, my next point says, you know, there's no chemical fertilizer or chemicals allowed on the organic part of your farm. You know, that is a big mindset change. It's a challenge, and you know, maybe it's a step too far for some people to decide to put the whole farm in, but it's a wonderful opportunity, I think, that you can put just part of the farm in. Okay, as I mentioned before, 2 years before your farm gets the full organic status, and then one of the caveats, one of the key things of going partially organic is you just can't grow the same crop in any given season on the organic part of your farm and on the conventional part. So for example, if I was growing winter wheat in 2024, in the conventional part of my farm, I can't grow winter wheat organically that year, but I could the following year if I'm not growing winter wheat conventionally. So you just have to be very careful, you know, that you stay within the scheme rules. There are other things like, you know, storing your produce. Obviously, you should have, you know, a separate shed for storing produce. Keep it away from all the conventional inputs. You know, so that stands to reason. If you have fields near one another, for example, if you have a conventional and organic field, you'd want to make sure that there's definitely a high hedgerow or, you know, a definable distance between the two, so that you don't risk contamination of spray drift from one over to the other. And I suppose the big one, and Fintan hit on this, you know, that the profitability or, you know, where the money is at, I suppose, the potential is that, you know, at the moment we do have a situation where there's organic grain, you know, for, organic livestock, you know, when they do require to be fed cereals or ration, it has to be organic ration. And a lot of that is imported at the minute. And like last winter, we were looking at figures of around 850 to 950 euros per tonne is what farmers had to pay for it, and even more if they were buying it in small bags. So there's a wonderful opportunity there for Irish tillage farmers to supply that market and, you know, to charge less, obviously, and it's a win-win for everyone. So the buyer pays less and the producer makes, you know, gets a nice premium for their produce. So just to address this whole organic feed area, I actually had a meeting in Abbeyleix with about 40 organic tillage farmers back in early March, on the 1st of March. And arising out of that, a lot of growers were very concerned. They just didn't know what size market really they were producing for. These are existing organic growers. They're a little bit afraid that, will there be a market there for their produce? So the Department of Agriculture came on board there and they initiated a feed survey, which was great. They sent out a survey to 4,000 of the organic farmers. They got a really, really good response rate. So they got almost 1,200 responses. And one of the things, that came out of it was the big demand for straight feeds, first of all. And there's a very big demand for this. It's known as kind of a combi crop or combination crop, but it's a mixture of a legume like a pea or a bean mixed with a cereal, so like a wheat and oats or a barley. And there was a demand from those respondents. It amounted to about just over 1,500 tons is what they would be looking for this coming winter. They would also be looking for about a further 1,500 tons for straight organic wheat, organic oats, or organic barley. Another thing was that there's going to be there is a strong demand, they said, for organic concentrate feed, mainly beef, but also sheep, and then some dairy and poultry. This was from the respondents in the survey. And that amounted to just over 8,000 tons. And then there was also, they showed a very high demand for forages. So over 9,000 ton of forage, mainly silage and hay, but there was about 1,000 ton there as well of red clover silage demand. So, it's very encouraging to see that there is, I suppose this was encouraging for tillage farmers to see real data, real figures. So what do I do with these figures? I've decided to put them I'm trying to guess my best guesstimate as to where I see the total market size for the moment. So what I'm doing is there was 1,200 out of 4,000 there respondents. So let's just go to my next slide. It's not moving on for me. 1 second. I'm getting a glitch here. There. Okay. So the potential demand then. What I've done is there was really only about 1/3, obviously. There was about 30% of the 4,000 responded. I'm just safely, conservatively estimating we could multiply those figures by 2. The demand if we had more respondents. So I would say it's more than this, but we'll just safely multiply that demand by 2. So my 1,500 tons has gone to 3,000, and the 1,500 for the grain has gone to 3,000, so on. I've doubled everything. So that's kind of where we see the animal feed tonnage that'll be required this winter, conservatively. And then if I add in the oats that was contracted in, I was chatting to Johnny Flahavan yesterday, and they took in 9,300 tons there in 2022. That was contracted in for the organic oat market. Whites took in 500 tons last year on contract, and about 900 is contracted this year. But the one thing I would say about both Flahavans and Whites, they have they're saying it's a very good space. It's growing well, the sector, and they both expect to be expanding these figures. Okay, so and then between other mills, Waterford, Stirling, and so on, I've thrown in another 1,000 tons. So about 33,000 tons is where we're looking at for the projected demand. So how do we meet that demand? Are we meeting it? It's very hard to get good data on the hectares that are currently in organic, but I got a source from the Department of Agriculture there from 2021 that there was 3,342 hectares of organic cereals in 2021. And about 70% of that was organic oats. So that's obviously most of that is going to the Flahavan market and Whites. So that's, as I say, about 70% of the area. And then the rest of it would be organic wheat, organic barley, organic feed oats that's not going to Flahavans, and some of the combi crops. And then some provisional figures I got from the department there I was trying to find out how many went in just before Christmas that were tillage farmers. There was about 30 or 34, I think was the figure, and it represented about 660 hectares. So that'd be about 20 hectares each. So that must be maybe people dipping their toe in the water, putting in about 20 hectares, including 2 or 3 of my old clients I persuaded to go in. So if we add that 660 hectares to the 3,342, we're looking at about 4,000 hectares, I would imagine. So give or take, somewhere in around 4,000 hectares, possibly up to 4.5. It's very hard to get accurate data. But what I would say is, we know that there's probably safe to assume there's 33,000 tons required. So I would imagine at 4 or 5 tons per hectare, we could very easily say we need double that area. We probably need about 8,000 hectares to meet that 33,000 ton requirement. Okay, and don't forget, we're very positive in terms of what we expect will go into the scheme again this year. We fully expect there could be another 2,000 farms going in again, so that would further increase the tonnage by probably another 10,000 tons. Okay, so it is positive. It's all good news. So what are the considerations then, I suppose? You know, if you want to go organic tillage, and first question, you know, a critical one is, have you a source of organic manure? If you don't have organic manures, really then you're faced with spending a lot of money. You're going on to another expensive treadmill of buying speciality approved fertilizers. You know, it's not going to be as lucrative. Okay, the economics mightn't stack up. The big one really is, I've often heard this phrase, you can convert the farm, but you won't, you know, but it's harder to convert the farmer. And it is true. Have you the right mindset? You know, you have to forget about what will the neighbors think. Okay. It's a fear. There is a fear, a genuine fear, and I understand it. But this is why I think the partial option is a great option. You know, have you the skill set to adapt? I'll mention in a while, I'll go into the weed control challenge, but I'm very confident that if anyone has the skill set, it's traditional tillage farmers, conventional, that have all the skill sets in the world to tackle things. I would say you need to think very strategically when you're converting. You know, if you had a field, for example, full of wild oats and every weed imaginable, that probably isn't the best starting point. Whereas if you have a field that is only after coming out of grass in the last few years, maybe a new block of land that you're farming that's quite clean, that could be the one to convert first, because you won't have the same weed burden. Are you a good seller? So what I mean, you know, it's not as simple as just, there's no, at the minute, you know, there wouldn't be a merchant where you could deliver, for example, a combi crop, a mixture of peas and beans into that'll happily take it and use it. You'd want to be selling it direct, but are you a good seller? Like, there are plenty of farmers already out there contract growing maize and doing it very successfully. So you do have to be a little bit more, I would say, proactive if you want to keep the value in your farm gate. You know, have you got adequate storage, the infrastructure to do it? So these are things I think you should be considering. Could you partner up, for example, with a few other farmers to form an efficient supply chain? So I did have one farmer, organic farmer, who has quite a lot of customers already for organic feed, animal feed in the west of Ireland. And he did say to me the other day, you know, if I wouldn't mind, I suppose his issue is he could double what he sells, he said to me, if he had a consistent supply of organic feed coming into him. But he doesn't have the storage. He's not as well geared up for it as he could be. And he said, you know, I sort of suggested if you had one farmer with maybe the dryer, another farmer with adequate shed space. I'll show you some machinery in a minute that can be used for mechanical weed control. Maybe you could form maybe a machinery ring where you share the machine to do your weed control. But forming maybe efficient supply chains is really the way we should be going, you know. So what are the technical challenges? I know you wanted me to address this, Pat, because it is a big one. We're going to remove chemicals, we're going to remove fertilizer. How do you do it, and what are the biggest challenges? And as I see it, the number one challenge is weeds. When I went for this job last year, I asked 3 farmers. I just wanted to get their feeling. What do you think of when I mentioned the word organic tillage farming? And the word they all said was weeds. The third guy actually said weeds and dirt. So it is seen, it's perceived as the number one challenge. I would say it is. There's no lying about it. But there's lots of solutions that don't involve chemistry. And like I've written there at the top, number one challenge, weed control without herbicides. I would say that is starting to become the number one challenge on conventional farms, because we're seeing more and more herbicide resistance, weeds becoming tolerant, especially grass weeds, but we also see it now in the broadleaf weeds like chickweed. So it's becoming an issue, and it's not just an issue of organic farming. So what are the solutions? A lot of these again tie in with the solutions for conventional farmers, but good crop rotation. So one of the, I suppose, the fertility building crops that would be used in a tillage rotation in organics would be red clover. It's a very, very good crop to grow. You know, a couple of years of red clover, it'll smother the weeds out. It could reduce your weed burden over a number of years. So there's one option of bringing in grass lays into your rotation. The false seedbed technique. I have a grower who is actually attempting to grow organic fodder beet this year, and he ploughed the field in early spring and he gave it a run of an old harrow, and that stimulated weeds to grow. When they grew, he came in with the harrow again and he took them out of it and flushed out another set of weeds. And came in again, so that when the drill came in and saw that that beet is now at the cotyledon stage, and there is very, very hardly a weed in sight, and it'll be left then to an inter-row hoer to do the rest of the job. So I'm not saying we'll get 100% weed control, but if you get an acceptable level and you haven't used chemistry, it's proof it can be done. Seeding rates has always been used as a kind of a tool to smother out weeds, that you would increase the seeding rate in a cereal crop by 10 or 15% to just make it more competitive. Keeping the ground covered in the autumn. If you're spring cropping, you know, don't leave the ground bare in the autumn, try and keep it covered. Species like mustard are very good at smothering weeds. Companion crops, so, you know, say for example, clovers down in the base of cereal crop that'll act as a mulch to keep weeds down. And then I want to, I suppose, just delve on this one here, the mechanical weeding technology. I had the opportunity to go to Holland there a few weeks back, and it's fascinating what is coming down the tracks, what is there already, and what's coming down the tracks in terms of technology. And I think this kind of technology will be very applicable as well to conventional tillage farmers, especially seeing as there's a need for them to reduce pesticide input by 50% by 2030. This could be one of the ways to get there. I'm just going to show you a picture of a machine. So this is just, I'm going to just show you a sample now, a range of what's out there. And this is known as a precision tine harrow. So it's, there are basic versions of this kind of a machine known as just a spring tine grass harrow or a straw harrow, but this is actually a step up again. It's a precision tine harrow. So each of the little springs or tines are individually spring loaded, and they can ride the contours of the land. They can even go down in the valleys in drilled crops down into the low valleys. So I'll say no more about it, and I'll just share with you a little video I have prepared of it. This was last Thursday up in Wicklow. And just first of all, before I play the video, that's a crop of organic spring oats, and it looks every bit as good as any conventional crop of spring oats. Okay, so this is it working, and we'll play this here now. 1 second. If I can, where's my mouse gone there? Okay. See, you know, no real harm to the cereal crop. That will just come back up, just like running a roller over it. That'll recover in a few days. But yeah, it's doing a fairly good job on these weeds. There's now a bigger weed. There's a volunteer rape actually. If you can see that there, there's a volunteer rape. So it's at the I suppose the 2 true leaf stage there. Good big cotyledons and set of true leaves. There was a nice little root on it, and it managed to uproot it. So it's aggressive enough, you know. Here's another one, slightly bigger again. Yeah, it's done a job on that one as well. So that's probably the limit, as large a weed as you really want to be trying to get with this kind of a machine. You know, a little bit of damage here to the cereal crop, the odd one. Yeah, okay, so there is a little bit of damage to the oats, but generally speaking, yeah, no, that oats is fine. That'll bounce back up. So yeah, interesting technology. So yeah, so that's a very interesting machine. So that, as I say, it doesn't go inter-row. That goes, you know, takes the row of corn and everything. And but you know, very effective. I would say we were probably 2 weeks too late going into the crop. The manufacturer of the machine would actually recommend you're going in on much smaller weeds. Even going in sometimes before the crop emerges above the height of the seed, he recommends, which I find amazing. But this is the kind of technology that's out there, and you know, there's huge potential with it. The next machine then would be going between the rows, so inter-row cultivating, and you can get these camera guided machines. Let's see, can I put a pointer on here on this, a laser pointer there. So if you can see that there where I'm pointing the laser dot, that there is a camera. And it's following the lines of the crop. So it's guiding then the machine. The machine shifts left or right. It's on a sliding frame here. And you leave your link arms stabilizers off open so that your machine can slide back and forth to make sure it stays accurately between the row, so that the hoeing equipment, then the tines on these machines, these duck feed tines, are operating between the row and not taking the crop. But these are very effective, and to be effective on much larger weeds. So just, you know, that technology is there. And even, for example, there is I know we've heard a lot about artificial intelligence taking over the world there recently, but there is this AI type technology there that'll differentiate a weed from the crop, and you know, is very, very accurate at it'll just pick out the weed, and it'll just, you know, it won't touch the crop. It can operate along the row, so not just between the rows. So this is where, you know, technology is amazing what's coming. So then, and this is just, again, if you couldn't afford, for example, if you don't go for, let's just say you have an old harrow at home, an old springtime harrow or something, or you're good at making frames, welding up bits and pieces together, what a farmer could do is just buy this main attachment here. This has the camera on it. So the front of this machine out here attaches to the tractor. This is actually the back of it. And what you could do then on these link arms here is attach your own. You could have a 20-year-old implement or 40-year-old implement and attach it on there. And it'll be guided by the camera from this steering unit. So, you know, there's a lot of flexibility there in what you might decide to go for. This was a machine then, this is just where things are kind of going at. This is you know, the scale of where things are going. This is a fully automated robot that'll sow a crop for you and weed it for you. And this was actually on display in the ploughing match last year. And it was invented by two brothers from Denmark. So, you know, the technology is amazing what's coming along to get around this weed control issue. So what are the other technical challenges? As I mentioned, access to organic manures. And, you know, we're not all lucky enough to maybe to have a slide, but some farmers tillage farmers would already have been using organic manures. You're allowed to use cattle slurry. It just can't come from an intensive like a feedlot, okay? You can use farmyard manure, and you must allow it 3 months to compost. Dairy sludge is becoming very popular on the organic farms, and so long as it's certified organic. And you can use organic or free-range poultry manure. So those are kind of the sources of the organic manures as we know it. Now, if you don't have a source of organic manures, I suppose this is where you're at a disadvantage. You know, you're going to have to maybe spend money on some of the more expensive alternatives. But I suppose the first point I want to make, and this applies to any, whether it's conventional or organic, you must maintain and build soil fertility, good farming. Whether it's organic or conventional, you should be at least maintaining fertility. So, you know, you can still apply lime if required. You know, you do have then expensive alternatives like SOP, sulfate of potash. Polysulfate is allowed in organics. It's another very good fertilizer. So, you know, rock phosphate, there's a number of them there, patent kali, but you'd like to be trying to meet your nutrient requirement with the traditional sources like the cattle's manures and, you know, the cattle slurries and the farmyard manures. But obviously, if you're in an integrated system where you have livestock on your farm, sheep or beef with your tillage enterprise, that's the nice place to be, because you will have your own source of organic manures. But we're not all that fortunate. Some of us are stockless tillage farmers that are going organic. And one of the things, however, that could be, I've written there, a possible game changer in that situation where you don't really have much organic manure, or you mightn't have the free dairy sludge right beside you. Here's one of the options here, and I would say it's definitely a potential game changer for the organic tillage farmer, because this is a pelleted poultry manure. And this is something you can spread with your own fertilizer spinner. And so, you know, I suppose the advantages there is you're not dependent on a contractor to come in with heavy slurry tankers. They'll come to suit themselves because they have such a busy work schedule ahead. They'll usually come by, ironically, when there's been a few days of rain and the ground could be compacted and you don't really want them coming. So here's a solution that you can put out as a top dressing on the growing crop, or you could apply this to the ploughed ground and till it in. They are actually, I think, making it into a finer pellet as well, so that you'd be able to, a real good one would be that you'd be able to combine drill this, put it down the spout with your seed when you're drilling, especially if your indices for phosphorus were maybe, you know, 1 or 2 down low. So here's another little video just to show you this in operation. Can we click on this now? 1 second. Pointer option. Now. You can see there we have trays on the ground there to measure as well how accurately it was spreading, how wide was it spreading, and how evenly. again, another crop that, as I say, if it was a conventional crop, I'd be very proud of it. I wouldn't, if you told me if it was conventional, I believe you, no difference. A very good crop of spring oats being grown organically there. So, okay, so look, what are the other technical challenges? You know, disease control, it goes back to the fundamentals of any type of crop farm, good crop rotation. You know, trying to, you know, I suppose, avoid growing the same crop year in, year out in the same field. Choosing resistant varieties and intercropping. So, you know, maybe mixing more than one species together. So this is where, for example, you know, your combi crop, combination type crop is popular. Sometimes, you know, even just mixing varieties together, you can reduce the disease burden. But look, you will get disease, but you won't get as much of it generally in an organic crop because you're not pumping loads of artificial nitrogen into the crop. You're not going to have as thick a crop canopy as you would in a conventional situation. So it's not going to get the same level of disease. So that's one thing I would say. So the challenge isn't as big. There are products you can use like sulfur as well to apply as a that would have some sort of fungicidal properties. That's fully, you know, approved, organic friendly. So you don't have to go spraying fungicides. You don't need, you know, you don't have to. There's no dependence. So I just want to move into, how am I doing on time? Right. I just want to move into the whole area of the margins, because at the end of the day, that the title of the talk was, is it viable? And at the end of the day, sometimes we're often accused of not having figures, enough good data, profitability figures, and so on. So I've attempted to call it as it is, and I'm trying to be fair to both systems, to conventional and organic. So I'm just going to show you a range of situations, of scenarios, and I also want to highlight, I suppose, the volatility of how input prices and output prices affect both systems, and which system has the better cushion to adjust to these volatility situations. So first of all, very quickly, in 2022, the prices, I'll just put all this up. So there's our prices on the right. The grain price was roughly 290 euros green for conventional growers. And the grain price, say the Flahaven contracted price for organic oats was 430. And if we look at, if I take the 5-year average yield for spring oats from the CSO data, it's 7.2 tons per hectare. So if the conventional grower, so the figures down along the left-hand side are all conventional, they're from the crop costs and returns booklet. Okay, so that's the Teagasc costs and returns. And we've taken the 5-year average. And then what I've done on the right-hand side for the organic crop of spring oats is a yield of 4.5 tons per hectare, which is 1.8 tons per acre, and at the 430. And you can see the differences in the prices. Can you see the bottom of that screen there?
I was going to say to you, we're missing the punchline there.
Yeah, how do I
move that bar?
Yeah, I'll move this bar up. Let's see, can I catch it here? I'll just move it up there. Now, that better?
Not yet. Oh, yes, very good.
Yeah. So the bottom line is effectively in 2022, an organic crop of spring oats was leaving a margin of about 600 euros an acre, and a conventional crop about 322. Okay. And then what then if it's not moving on for me now, is it? Let's see. I have to. There, now it is. It's there's a delay. It must be. I'm down in Port Leisure. There must be a delay in the line. Yeah. So look, so what happens there is then if we assumed, I suppose what I've done is a kind of a worst case scenario. You're growing the crop organically. You're growing it with none of the pesticide inputs. Okay. And you're not getting the premium price as well. Where does that leave things at? Okay. So you can see, so you're getting the 4.5 tons per hectare as opposed to 7.2. But what I've done is I've put the conventional price into it so that you're receiving conventional, no premium. And you can still see you're coming in there at around 345 euros an acre. So it's comparable to the conventional spring oat figure. But what I want to do is show you how the volatility affects things in terms of how much more the organic system is cushioned against these price hikes in fertilizer or collapse in grain price. So in this system in 2022, we had the high grain prices. Okay, but we also had the high fertilizer prices and the high grain prices. Now the perfect storm has arrived, and the price has collapsed. Has come back 100 euros a ton, but we still had the high fertilizer prices because most growers had their fertilizer bought there in the autumn or early spring. So now when we run all those, I'm going to just throw all the figures out. You can see very, very quickly, first of all, obviously, look, it's not good news for conventional spring oats this year now, because as I say, the price is well back, but the costs were high. So we're looking at maybe a margin of €31 an acre. But the organic spring oats, you know, is holding very well there at about 4.18 an acre. But just to show you that the figure there on the spring oats, you know, with no premium, you're still actually, believe it or not, able to get €163 an acre by growing it at that yield. At a 1.8 ton yield, you'd be getting 163 with no inputs an acre. Now, what I've not done here at all is I haven't added in the organic payments along the bottom. So, you know, they're still to be added in there on that. So, but what I suppose in a nutshell, I was working out a figure there that 2.4 tons per hectare, which is a ton per acre, is where you'd be kind of at. You'd have to ask yourself, even if you weren't organic at all, and getting no organic payment, if you were to grow a crop this year and achieve 1 tons per acre, that's kind of where you'd only need to get 1 tons per acre with no inputs, we'll say, bar your seed, okay, and you'd make the same as getting the 2.9 tons per acre or the 7.2 tons per hectare with all the inputs. You'd still be making €31 an acre. So it's just food for thought. And as I say to everybody, do your own sums. These are, you know, this is just my own take on it. What I've attempted to do here, I might just move this again, is a 7-year organic rotation, okay? And what I want to do is, it hasn't been, I don't think it's been attempted before, but it's often been thrown at me, you know, when I talk about margins just for 1 year. You need to look at the whole rotation over 5 or 7 years, the organic versus the conventional, and then see how do the figures stack up. So I've attempted to do it here. I've put a lot of work into these figures. They'll be up on the website or the usual platforms after anyway, where this goes, and people can look at these in more detail. So I'm not going to spend, not going to go through every single figure, okay? But what I've done is I've taken a 7-year rotation for organic, first of all, and what I've assumed is we take a block of land and you put it into red clover for 2 years in 2023 and 24, follow it with winter crop or winter wheat, follow it with spring oats, follow it with a full, what I'm very interested in is a pea and bean together, a full intercrop, I'm calling it, not pea and grain, but actually peas with beans. There's work being done in Oak Park at the moment by Sheila Alves, and it looks very promising. The beans will act as a scaffold to hold up the peas from lodging, and that would attract a full protein payment then, because there's no cereal in it. So that's the crop I've introduced into that rotation in 2027, followed then by winter wheat. I'll just move this again now up, and then followed by winter oats in 2029, and then you'd be back to your red clover of 2 years. So it's an ambitious rotation. I think it's very doable. You could alternate the winter oats into spring oats at times if you want to get more organic manures into the system in the springtime. But you know, that's what I've done then is I've taken a gross margin for each year. My assumptions are all there in the box. So I took organic grain at €400 a ton, red clover 45 a bale, and the full protein intercrop at 500 a ton. So on the next slide then, I click on, let's see, there. So this is my conventional rotation. I'll just move this around again. I'll just put this across there maybe now. So the 7-year conventional rotation, what I've taken, I've tried to be as fair as I can to both systems. So in 2023, I've used beans as the crop. You know, I could have used a cereal crop where we know the margins are going to be deflated, but I've started with beans in 23, which will be one of the better performing crops from the point of view of it didn't need the high cost of fertilizer that would be associated with the cereal crops. But if you go beans, winter wheat, followed by winter barley, followed by winter rape, followed by winter wheat, so you're growing first wheats after your break crops, and then you're back to your beans, and you're keeping your 4 years in the good rotation for legume, and then back to wheat, and you can see the gross margins it produces. And I've assumed here the prices I've taken is the current prices of where they're at for the beans and for the wheat and the barley, so that's, and the oilseed rape. I've allowed that seed cost will be lower from 2024 onwards, because if grain price is down, the seed cost this autumn should be back as well if grain price is back 100. I've assumed spray prices will stay the same. I've taken, obviously, fertilizer prices for the 2023 crops are what people have paid already, but what I've done is from 2024 onwards, I've reduced the fertilizer back by 50% fertilizer costs off the current. So I've tried to be fair. And the bottom line is this. If we click in here now, click on, I'll just see now, move this again down to the bottom now. So the average gross margin, if I average it out over the next 7 years, the organic rotation would give an average gross margin there, average of 496, and the conventional 7-year 287. So and that doesn't include the payments. So it's fairly, you're looking at a €200 an acre difference, and then add your payments on top of that, sure, there's another 120 or 30 euros an acre. Yeah, so to conclude there, okay, so I'm conscious of time. So as I say, I would say there's a very good short-term market, certainly. Okay, obviously, if 500 growers all came in with 500 acres each, that would dampen it, all right. But there is currently very good short-term market. Payment rates, as we've seen, very attractive. You can see from the figures, compares very favorably with conventional tillage farming. I would suggest the partial conversion is a great starting point. How we farm is changing. So, to be gearing up, be ready, be having a look at some of this mechanical weeding technology, that kind of stuff. Talk to your advisor. You need to measure where you're currently at. Have a look at your e-profit monitors, see what you're currently doing, and see, is it, sustainable? And then finally, I would say, I suppose, is just to attend a few organic farm walks. It's a great place to get the information, and it leads me into the last slide here. Just is the one here, is just to highlight again. It's where I'm off to now after this. So there's an organic farm walk there. It's the first of our growing organic walks. It's the first of 4 that we'll have growing organic walks, but we also will have 24 local walks as well this year. So there's a huge amount of walks out there that you can get to. The organic certification bodies are organizing several walks. The ACA, there's a headwind behind this, you know what I mean? All the organizations are on board. I must say it's extremely helpful as well, the people I've come across in all the different sectors, and they deal with the organic certification bodies and so on. So there's a real sense of we're in this together and we're moving this thing forward, and it is happening. Okay, that's it, Pat. I'll stop sharing my screen. Yeah.
Let me use that button that's been plaguing your screen for some reason.
Yeah, I don't know why it wouldn't go away. Yeah.
Okay, quite a few questions coming in, and remind you to use the Q&A to put your questions. I think a huge amount of food for thought. I don't think anybody outside of the organic sphere would have expected the kind of figures that you're showing there today. And certainly it's going to give a lot of people a bit of food for thought in terms of what their future system is. Fintan, do you want to kick off with some questions there?
Kick off there.
Yeah.
First question is Irish land good for tillage and horticulture versus animal agriculture? And are there regional variations?
Yeah, very interesting question that. Look at, obviously some parts of the country are just not suitable for tillage, there are, parts in the west of Ireland, but there are parts there are pockets that are very suitable. Traditionally, I suppose Munster, Leinster, would be the traditional strongholds for tillage production, but there's nothing to say you can't grow crops on good. There will be some pet fields, especially maybe on some farms in the in other parts of the country, more marginal land. But even in the good tillage soils of the southeast where I'm from, we still have some fields that are in grass for a reason. So you get huge variation within farm out there as well, Fintan.
Yeah. It's important for each farmer to assess. And
it is. And I would say
actually soil maps, isn't there, Martin?
That's right. There's very good soil maps that you can get, and a lot of counties are covered in it, and it'll show you very, very down to nearly the field if it's suitable for what kind of characteristics in terms of drainage and so on. I suppose one of the things, if fields have been in grass a long time, and some of the fields may not have seen a lot of lime over the years, I would say you want to correct your soil fertility first before you start growing tillage crops, because nearly all the tillage crops want a pH, preferably 6.5 to 7. Oats is obviously very tolerant of pH down to 5, but it's if you want to have a diversity in your rotation, and especially if you want to grow the red clovers and so on in your rotation, we know that clovers like higher pH as well. So I think get your soil pH, get it into a good position. Yeah.
Another one then. What is the minimum area of hectares you can have to grow organic I presume it's grow organic in terms of a scheme.
In terms of the scheme, yeah. So okay, to go into the scheme, you have to have is a minimum of three hectares. They lowered it down to go into the scheme now, and it's just 1 hectare for the horticulture down. And they may even take it on a case by case of some of the horticultural applications. If it was marginally smaller, but 3 hectares in general is the minimum area now. Yeah, and 5 hectares if you wanted to go for TAMS funding for tillage. Yeah.
Okay. Are organic cereal variety trials carried out in Ireland?
There has always been, well, for a long time, spring oat variety trialing. And what's great this year is the department have come on board and they've broadened that out now into spring barley variety testing. I was actually on a site in Wexford. There's one in Wexford. There's one actually on the farm we're going to today in Jason Stanley's. And there's another couple around the country. And they're testing 8 spring barley varieties this year. And they're testing 7 spring oat varieties for organic to see what's, suitability in
It's
organic
fantastic
rotation.
because there is variation between countries, and it's important that
Yeah.
we have that information.
And just to add to that, it would be wonderful if it was expanded even further. I think with all the red clover that's being used, it'd be great if we could
Absolutely.
maybe get red clover trialed in Ireland.
Yeah,
I
it
suppose
would be
with
important.
all the focus on reduced inputs and particularly reduced pesticides inputs, how much of the breeding program is now focusing on building those resistance to those diseases that are problematic for Irish farmers?
There's like on the conventional side, it is becoming part, because of the pressure to reduce pesticides as well by 50%, there's an awful lot of work going into disease resistance. It's not all about yield anymore, Pat. They're looking more and more at disease, and you see there are newer disease issues out there. Like I can remember when I first started in the industry, there wasn't even a mention of the word ramularia. And now ramularia and barley is a big issue, but and septoria is still a huge issue in wheat. It's just been glossed over a bit in the last few years because we've had incredibly dry springs or summers, but we will get that wet year where, you know what I mean, and there's going to be disease pressure years, and this is why we need those varieties there. And there is very, very good work being done on breeding for good disease resistance with all the breeding companies. Yeah.
Another one then, in relation to TAMS, if a tillage farm goes organic, do they get a higher rate of TAMS?
Yeah, I wouldn't like that to be the only reason why a tillage farmer might.
The addiction to heavy metal that can be there.
Yeah, and I wouldn't like to be encouraging a farmer just go organic because I'll get myself 18,000 euros more money, because that is what you effectively would get, because your ceiling straight away. Your ceiling is 90,000, but the 20% extra, so instead of 40% of 90,000 you can get 60%, which is, when you do the maths on it, that's a difference of 18,000 euro. Yeah. So yes, there would, but one of the things I would say, you'd like people to be coming in for the right reasons and for the long haul. Okay.
There's a lot more to be taken into consideration. It's nice, but there's a lot more to be taken into consideration.
Yeah.
And now there's a good few questions on nutrients. So
okay,
is cattle slurry on its own high enough in N to grow a successful crop?
Good question. Yeah, it is, I would say, if you are in that lovely integrated system where you have your clovers in the rotation and you're supplying your nitrogen from the clovers, you're getting enough of a kick there. I would say it's going to be a tighter, that ambitious 7-year program I showed mightn't quite work in it, because you're going 5 years of tillage after 2 years of clover. But if you're in maybe 3 years of tillage and back to clover, then certainly. If you're in the stockless system, or you're trying to be ambitious, that's an ambitious plan I have there in the 7-year. I would say, if you're only putting out, say, 3,000 gallons of cattle slurry. Now, the dreaded splash plate word, I know Pat would hate me to be saying that word on this hour, but if it was splash plated, you're only going to get about 3 units of nitrogen from each of those 1,000. So you're only going to get maybe 9 units of nitrogen on a crop. That in fields that might have been in tillage a long time that are now organic, to me, that crop would be starved of nitrogen. So you're going to need some other source of organic manure in there. Or this is where maybe your poultry pelleted manure comes in now. That's why I have it down as a game changer.
And your rotations obviously are vital in terms of keeping all the nutrients right.
Yeah, and even in that rotation, you saw I put a protein crop in there in the middle of it to try and jizz up the rotation a bit with a bit of nitrogen, give it a boost. Yeah, you know.
And then the other option, dairy sludge. A question: what is the amount of N, P, and K in dairy sludge?
Yeah, good question. It's, I would say, a very, very good source of phosphorus. So it's very high in P, most of them. Now there are variations. It depends
Yeah.
on the system, you know, the process. But there's variations in what goes in, whether it's whey or more milk. You know, but what I would say generally, what I've seen from most of them is they're very high in phosphorus, and some of them have a very good amount of nitrogen as well. But in saying that, I know some of the research from Johnston Castle, from some of the researchers there, they have a variation of from as little as 4 to as high as 52% nitrogen availability coming from that nitrogen. So,
Right.
you know, so that you don't be fooled by the total nitrogen figure. You want to see what's available. But what I would say is they are wonderful manures. I've been involved in a project, Nutri2Cycle Horizon project, that the Johnston Castle researchers are on, and you know the 2 different types of dairy processing sludge in that trial, and they have matched conventional fertilizer yields. You know, they can be a direct substitute, and there's definitely, you know, there's a bit of a body in the stuff. You can see good plots, you know, good canopy development. So they're doing more than just NPK. What I would say is there isn't much potash in them, so you'd want to be balancing up the potassium. Okay.
Yeah.
So, but if you have cattle slurry, that's where they'd actually they complement one another very, very well, because the cattle slurry is, you know, low enough in nitrogen, you know, okay in phosphorus, but very high in potassium. So there's, you know, if you're using a combination of that, which some growers are, it's good. And the good news is it's free in most situations if you're within 20 miles or so. Yeah.
Speaking of potash, do you run the risk of running down your K levels if taking many cuts of red clover silage?
Yeah, you do. That's the answer, is yes, you do run the risk. And this is why it comes back to whether you're conventional or organic farming. We have to keep the science in it and make sure we're matching our offtakes and think very carefully about what we're doing, because it's in 3 or 4 years' time that you'll suddenly realize the well has run dry of any particular nutrient. And what I would say there is, you know, you've got to, like, if you think about it, every time you take a bale of red clover silage out of the field, that's probably 10 units of potassium gone. So if you're cutting 20 bales a year out, that's 200 units gone from that field. If you were doing that over a 2 or 3 year period, and you're only replacing it, maybe we'll just say, for instance, with 2,000 gallons of cattle slurry, that's only 60 units maybe of potash going back in each year, but just 140 going out. So you need to know your offtakes, no matter what type of farming system you're in. And I think this area needs more focus. You know, farmers, and they are, in fairness, they're getting more and more focused on this the whole area of nutrient balancing. It's becoming very much to the fore.
Yeah, red clover is a kind of a magical crop. It can harvest 250 kgs of N per hectare. But the risks are, there's technical items with it. Can be wet and it needs to be wilted, and also the K level, it is hungry for K. So if people are working with livestock farmers going to take that silage, bringing back that slurry, having a cycle, a circular economy there, where the silage is going out and the slurry is coming back.
Exactly. But from making, I made a couple of videos on farms of farmers that are growing red clover, and as I say, I would have known very little about red clover 12 months ago. I still know very little, but I know a little bit more about it. But the performance of their livestock on red clover is phenomenal. They, you know, they're even saying the DMD value isn't a true reflection of just how good this stuff is.
Always said that the DMD doesn't reflect the actual feeding as it's fed, and the intakes are fantastic. But if people grow it, and especially with the new scheme that's there, they might be putting it in. They have to cut it a little bit higher than normal because it's growing bud, and also feed the crop, get the K back on. And then it'll be successful, isn't that right?
And it's like any legume as well. And I know from one of the farmers in the video said it, and I would agree. It's a trait of legumes. They're very sensitive to compaction. And he would have said that when you're putting the slurry on between cuts, if it's actually, if the weather is damp and the soil structure is questionable, that you could damage it, stay out with the tanker altogether and just let it go. And just make note of it, that you didn't get that P and K on in that cut, but you'll have to make up for it later in the season. But the worst thing you can do nearly is come in with heavy machinery on the clover, because it can affect, you know, the rooting of it, the structure. So that's just something to bear in mind.
There's another one then in terms of cattle slurry, and there's 2 questions. Can organic farmers import slurry from a farmer in derogation? And the other angle to it is, cattle slurry, does it have to be from an organic source? So the first one is
but I suppose the answers to both is you can take in slurry. well, I suppose the first one is you can take in any cattle slurry from a derogation farmer or non-derogation, and the main thing is it wasn't just someone that had an intensive like feedlot type situation. Okay, so that's the answer to that, and there should be oodles of slurry this year. You know, much more than ever before with the way the regulation is gone. That slurry should be making its way. I'm very adamant that it should be. I really hope it is making its way onto organic farms or onto tillage farms anyway, where it can be used, you know, wisely. The other question, what was the other one again, Fintan?
It was
organic. Does it have to
yes,
come from an organic
does it have to
farm?
be from yeah.
No, it doesn't. So that's, which is great. It gives you loads of possibilities, you know.
Yeah.
The
The
question
source
there
of the pelleted, the source of the pelleted poultry manure. That was one.
Oh yeah,
Just a quick one.
Yeah, so the source of the pellet, I suppose we don't really want to get into to brand names or promoting anyone in particular. I think they probably are the only ones doing it, but there's a company in Monaghan doing it. This company that we use the stuff from has just opened up a pelleting plant near Newry. So look, if you want to Google them, Soil Works is the name, but I think they're the only ones at it. So I suppose I'm not trying to endorse any particular. I welcome anyone that gets into this industry. It's a great space to be in. Okay, so.
Sorry, just and Mark, there's just a question there in relation to soil bioinoculants and soil conditioners.
Okay.
The potential role they have and the kind of.
Yes. Well, look, there's what I would say with some of them, and there's one in particular is very heavily, I won't name any names, but they're obviously very heavily advertised. I can't go on Facebook without an ad popping up for it. What I will say about these products is I'm going to remain open-minded on them all. And we are actually trialing some of them in a trial in Wexford. So it'll be a replicated trial taken to harvest, 4 reps of each, and we are testing some of these type of products. So that's where I'm going to park that one for the moment, Pat. And maybe in a year's time, if I'm back, I'll tell you how they did.
We'll invite you back for the results of that one.
Yeah.
Quite a bit of interest in it.
Yeah.
There's one there. Ag policy is constantly changing, with organics getting a big push at present. If this was to change, can organic tillage stand on its own?
Well, that's why,
without the subs.
That's why I wanted to show the figures I did in the presentation, and you can all study them very carefully after, because it was really a whistle-stop tour through it. But have a look at them and you'll notice I have left the organic subsidy out of it, because I want to show that it can stand up on its own 2 feet without them. It's lovely to have the cushion of the payment there. You know, look, if something was to happen, that I hope we don't, but if conventional grain price goes back to where I remember at once upon a time, back at around, you know, I think 90 euros a ton green, 110 or 20 dried, you know, if we were ever to go back down to that kind of a route, and then obviously organic comes back down there, then you're going to be, I suppose, holding it up with the payment, all right, but God forbid we don't want to conventional tillage farming going back to that situation, you know. It's bad news for everyone.
Martin, just two questions strike me. One is, I suppose a lot of our tillage farmers are now fairly highly specialized, and a lot of them quite large. I suppose the sense I got from your presentation is that the 70 hectare limit shouldn't be considered by those farmers as the upper level for becoming an organic farmer. If that's a fair comment. The second thing is most, I suppose, of our tillage farmers are renting land on an ongoing basis. And to me, I just haven't got my head around how they will face the challenge of becoming and staying organic and staying within the rules. Yeah,
you see, and you won't get the organic farming payment on rented, we'll call it the 11-month system, which unfortunately an awful lot of tillage farmers are still on. So you'll only get it on land that's leased long term, and it has to have 5 years to run from the time you join the scheme. So that in a way is probably one of the reasons why there's not as much of an uptake as well, because so much tillage land is on rented land. So, you know, there's a bit of work to be done there, I think, and combining that with the restriction on the cropping, on what crops you can grow organic. Because you see, I have to be able to differentiate. I couldn't have, for example, conventionally grown winter wheat in one shed and organic wheat in the next shed, and sure, who's to say you could be mixing, you know, like you have to have some kind of authenticity about the whole thing, and it has to be correct. You know, you have to protect the standard as well. You have to have certain rules. It can't be a free for all, really. And look, there is only what I would say a certain finite market. We don't as I say, there has to be there's a room for everyone, but we wouldn't really. I wouldn't say we'd want to see, as I say, 400 or 500 of the biggest tillage growers all putting well over 70 hectares in. I certainly think that the current organic farmers, tillage farmers that are there, will be terrified at the thought. Yeah.
Okay, listen, I'm going to have to cut it there. We're out of time. We're just slightly over time. But listen, thank you very much. I think that was really enlightening. And as I said at the beginning, I think real food for thought for a lot of people. What's really encouraging is the fact that there are solutions to emerging to a lot of the issues that farmers would be considering as problematic. And I suppose the final thing is the gross margin at the end doesn't seem to be as much of a barrier as a lot of people might have thought. So listen, thank you very much, both to yourself and Fintan. I think it's been really enlightening. And as I say, we'll pull you back again in a year's time for more experience.
Yeah. Thanks, Pat. Okay.
Thanks for that. Next week we'll be joined by Dr. Stefan Giesen, looking at managing soil health. And I think we have a lot of regulation now imminent in relation to soil health, and the whole issue of soil health is going to become a much bigger part of our agricultural world over the next number of years. So that would be a really interesting sight into how we manage soil health. Without further ado, then I'll sign off and say thanks to Mary, Yvonne and Andy, our backroom team, and enjoy your bank holiday weekend and the fine weather. Stay safe, and we'll see you again next week. Goodbye.
Thanks.